New podcast in the description. Talked about Jaylen Brown versus Jason Tatum, and then I gave my review on Star Wars: The Last Jedi. From a physical standpoint, Arizona's DeAndre Ayton, a 7'1", 260-pound center who can jump through the gym as well as muscle through most players that he comes in contact with, is everything that you would want in a basketball player. And when we look at his strength and ability to dominate on both ends, he reminds me a lot of prime Dwight Howard, for Dwight's ability to grab at seemingly every single rebound possible, as well as just be a force when it came to finishing. And if we start with DeAndre Ayton and that finishing ability, it's pretty scary what he's already doing in college. He's currently shooting 85% at the basket, which you assume is going to go down in the NBA, but those are near cheat code numbers. 85%, the dude essentially never misses when he has an opportunity at the rim. His vertical, while it's technically listed at over 40 inches, that one might be a little bit of a mistake, but regardless, the dude gets up there. Constantly an alley-oop target, a roller to the rim. And a lot of these clips, it seems that the perimeter players for Arizona, they're just throwing it in Ayton's general vicinity, and no one else has a real chance to do anything about it. Now in the NBA, this is going to be a little more difficult because there are guys who physically will be able to match up with him more so than in college, but still, he's going to have an advantage when it comes to just anything he wants to do around the rim. And there are times when it looks like he is, number one, the biggest guy on the floor, but also just impossible to block and impossible to contest. And I think that there are still a decent amount of NBA bigs who, while they may be impressive physically, they might not be ready for what DeAndre Ayton's going to do to them in terms of just finishing through and over contact. But he's also shown some low post abilities as well. When his back is to the basket, he has an array of little drop step moves and some spin moves and hook shots, and there's even a turnaround jumper in here as well. So now you're looking at a guy who can really be the entire package when it comes to scoring inside. And in today's NBA, sure, the post-up is not the most used play, but if you're someone who can be efficient in doing those, then teams will still throw you the ball down there. Look at Joel Embiid or LaMarcus Aldridge as two examples. So Ayton's offensive game is already looking good, but if we can move over to the defensive side of the floor for a little bit, just when it comes to defensive rebounding, I see no reason as to why Ayton cannot potentially be the best rebounder in the NBA one day. In college, his defensive rebounding percentage is currently 30.6, and that would rank him about 7th or 8th in the NBA today among players who play at least 20 minutes a game. And rebounding is one of those categories that typically carries over from college to the NBA pretty smoothly. So for whoever has the luxury of drafting him, expect that team to not give up too many offensive rebounds when he's in the game. But speaking of offensive rebounds, he's going to grab a lot of those as well. His offensive rebounding percentage is 12.1, which would put him around number 10 in the NBA right now. When you look at a guy like this, who can be such a great pick-and-roll player, can catch anything around the rim, and can also grab potentially 2 to 3 offensive rebounds a game, maybe even more than that, you're starting to look at a guy who can really be a force offensively. Just the combination of everything, his post abilities, his finishing, and then grabbing a few more rebounds a game, also leading to more fouls, and we'll talk about his free throw shooting in a little. And while he should be used a lot offensively, even if he's not being used in nearly every play, he can always be making an impact. And while the defense of Ayton doesn't jump out immediately, the way that his rebounding and finishing around the basket would, I think he's got potential to be a quality defensive player as well. When you look at that verticality, sure, it'll take some seasoning in terms of defending the pick and roll and learning to defend outside of the paint, which is a big thing for NBA centers. But still, when we're talking about rim protection, I think there's a decent chance that he's going to be pretty okay at that stuff relatively early on in his career. So while defense may not be the thing that we're all freaking out about with him, I think he could definitely be above average, and combined with everything else, that's a hell of a player. But now let's get back to offense, specifically his shooting. he seems to have an appreciation for jump shots. He's willing to shoot them, and he's made enough open jumpers this season from mid-range and a couple from three to where I would think with just a lot of work, he could become a real option outside of the paint as well. The form looks pretty good. He definitely does not hesitate with these jumpers, and if the opposing team gives him just a little bit of room, he's got no problem hoisting it up there. Now, if he can progress on the jumpers, then we're talking about a player that it's kind of ridiculous. With the offensive rebounding, the finishing around the rim, the posting up, the athleticism, and then being able to shoot, I don't see why he can't be a 20-plus point scorer. Now, if we can get to his free throw shooting, he's currently shooting about 71% from the line. I think that's a good sign. A big man who is respectable, number one, is just effective because of how often he's going to get fouled, and DeAndre Ayton is going to get fouled a lot in the NBA. So if he can just convert a few points, that's great, but I think it's also a sign that he is a good shooter overall. Now, the three-pointers have not been as good as the mid-range. He is making a few threes, but overall he's only shooting 27% from out there, so he's not good enough to actually warrant shooting these. But if he could approach league average on three-pointers and provide that sort of spacing, I mean, then at that point, what the hell do you do against a guy who can knock down threes, post up, grab offensive rebounds, convert from the free throw line? I mean, you'd really have no chance. Now, that's the absolute ceiling for DeAndre Ayton, but given that his shooting is not so bad right now, he could be able to combine that outside touch with everything else he can do. I mean, the low post scoring, the post moves around the rim, and just the physical nature, the way that he can dominate on both baskets as a rebounder, drawing contact, finishing through it, getting to the free throw line, an alley-oop target, pick and rolls. DeAndre Ayton really could be the next great big man of the NBA. And then once again, new podcast in the description, Jason Tatum versus Jaylen Brown, and Star Wars: The Last Jedi.